Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Planning and Land Use Committee for Monday, May 6, 2024. First, we'll begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Kasepsum nations. The first order of business here is approval of the agenda. Approval of the agenda. If I can have a motion from the floor to approve the agenda, James. Thank you. Next item is the adoption of the minutes from the Planning and Land Use Committee meeting of April 2nd, 2024. If I could have a mover for that. We'll pick Michael for that one. We'll spread it around. Thank you. Next, we will have an opportunity for public participation. We have 2 minutes per speaker. So you'll be able to come up to the mic, just press the silver button at the base of the microphone. We'll be given 2 minutes. I will note as well that we had 1 written submission received prior to the agenda and 2 received subsequent to the agenda that will be appended to the meeting minutes. So if there is anyone at this point that would like to come to the podium and speak, please feel free to do so. I see someone.
We on? Oh, sorry. We are on. Thank you for the opportunity for 2 minutes, Chairman and members of the committee. The area that I want to address is...
Sorry, can I interject for a moment?
Sorry, Colleen.
I know you, so I let you go.
Colleen Brownlee.
Name and location.
Yeah, thank you. Colleen Brownlee, 132 3640 Propeller Place. Now does my 2 minutes start? Okay, thank you. I'm not going to speak directly about the development per se, but I am going to speak about our particular area in that we are on the connector trail. We do have a statutory right-of-way through our property for pedestrian use. And our concern would be one of safety with the additional traffic that is about to happen. While it is a statutory right-of-way for pedestrians, we have cyclists, mopeds, motorcycles, etc. And we're thankful that City of Colwood did change our fire gate because it is a private road to a more amenable fire gate. However, that still allows motorcycles, mopeds, etc. to come through, which does cause a safety hazard for not only for our residents, but any residents and pedestrians who come through from Elevation Point. And I would assume that should this zoning be approved, it will increase because of the number of hopefully pedestrians and not any kind of something with wheels to come through. So I think that to me is a major concern. Also, very quickly, when our development was developed, we were required to put up a chain link fence, which was done. And we were also required, where the fire gate is now, to put in a gate to access a path to Latoria Park. Well, I don't know if anybody has been there, but I would invite you to come and have a look and have a walk. The gate is there, but one would either have to be a mountain goat or take their life in their hands to either go down to that access or come up it. And my understanding was that Colwood ran out of money, so that's one of the paths that was never ever completed. So if you haven't been there, I know Councillor Ward, you do a lot of walking. It would be a good idea to just come through and have a look at it. Let's see, 2 minutes. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
Good evening, committee. My name is Karen Woodland. I live at 524 Elevation Point Terrace. Joel and I submitted a letter detailing our concerns with the request for rezoning. In summary, this application seeks maximum density with minimum standards for aesthetics, safety, and livability, and offers no amenities. We believe this proposal should not be approved. Existing neighborhood townhome complexes, like the one Colleen lives in, have set a high standard, which we believe should be followed. And again, I would invite you to take a look at the design, the landscaping of, there's at least 3 on either side of this site done very well. Your role as a Citizens Advisory Committee is to assist Mayor and Council to determine whether this rezoning aligns with the OCP strategic plan, climate action plan, and the other guiding documents designed to make Colwood a desirable and livable community with safe, attractive, cohesive neighborhoods. We hope you will agree the density requested is too high and send this plan back to the drawing board. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the audience? See, gentleman from the back here.
Hi, my name is Steve Mandy, 498 Bezanton Way. And I echo all of the thoughts brought up so far this evening. I was the one that submitted the traffic memo for Bezanton Way. I hope you had a look at it. You're only going to understand that if you come and you observe it. Just by reading a piece of paper or having us talk about it, or the developer talk about it, you're getting 2 stories. You need to see it for yourself. As for the path, I took it upon myself to cut that path for 3 years until people started coming up through my backyard as a way around. So I stopped doing that. Sorry, Colleen. The density of the now proposed 44 is still too high for a community, our little community. We have Royal Bay, let's call it north, the new development that they're building, the new Royal Bay South, where the museum collections areas. There are multiples of townhomes, condominiums, freestyle homes, apartment buildings, all the way down Latoria, same thing. When we purchased our homes on Bezanton Way, we purchased with the understanding that phase 2 was going to be 27 homes. That's why I invested $1 million+ in our home. We do not want 44, 47, 56, 58, 77 new homes up in that rock fit. Turn it into parkland. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public participation? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to new business, which is item 5.1. I believe Desiree Gibbons, planner, is going to speak to the rezoning application for 517 Latoria Road or Bezanton Way. Thank you. Thanks, Desiree.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. So this first item in your agenda is a rezoning application for 517 Latoria at the end of Bezanton Way. And just for some context, the application was first received by staff in October 2023, or that's when we received a complete application. The application then underwent a review by staff, and that was between October 2023 and December 2023. So we referred it out to all applicable city departments as well as external agencies. All feedback and comments were then compiled and provided to the applicant in December. And between December and April of this year, the applicant has revised their submission as well as conducted neighborhood consultation in January and February this year. The application is now before you tonight for a recommendation to council. Just for some site context, the subject property is located near the intersection of Wishart and Latoria Road at the end of Bezanton Way and close to the intersection of Bezanton and Elevation Point. It is currently zoned Comprehensive Development 8, CD8 zone, which permits detached dwellings units up to 59. The applicant is requesting amendment to the CD8 zone to add duplexes and attached housing units or townhomes as a permitted use and to increase the permitted density from 59 to 77 dwelling units. This will be an additional 18 units. The property is designated in the official community plan as neighborhood hillside, and the next few slides will go over some of the policies for the neighborhood hillside designation. Starting with the built firm policy. So the neighborhood hillside designation supports ground-oriented buildings up to 3 stories, including multi-unit townhomes and it supports a floor area ratio of 1.2. The proposal is for 3-story townhomes with an overall FAR or floor area ratio of 0.52. So both of these policies have been met. With respect to the public realm policies, the neighborhood hillside designation requires proposals to improve the public realm for pedestrians, create a high degree of permeability, including direct walking connections between residential areas leading to and from frequent transit and local transit service as well, and to protect and optimize views from public spaces. The first phase of this development improved the public realm for pedestrians and created a high degree of permeability. Since it provided frontage improvements along the south side of Latoria Road, including a sidewalk, street lighting, curbs, boulevard grass, and trees. Views are not anticipated to be impacted from the public open spaces such as Latoria Road, Madrona Pink Park, or Latoria Creek Park. So all 3 of these policies have been met by this proposal. With respect to the natural assets, the neighborhood hillside designation requires that buildings be designated or designed to protect the natural assets of the lands consistent with site adaptive planning policies. Site adaptive planning is a general approach that involves identifying buildable and non-buildable areas and arriving at a site plan that reflects site opportunities and constraints and maintains the natural systems and minimizes disruption to the natural features of the lands. Development should be clustered in a manner that protects and preserves the natural features, and when development is proposed on a greenfield site, 40% of the property should be retained as private, part public open space. As part of this rezoning application, the applicant has retained qualified professionals to conduct an environmental analysis and identify the buildable and non-buildable features of the lands, as well as outline a site adaptive planning approach to cluster the development in the areas of least constraint. Further, the proposal will retain 52% of the parcel as private open space in accordance with this policy. With respect to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, so the City of Colwood's Parks and Recs Master Plan identifies the Latoria neighborhood as a prime candidate for a future park site with play amenities. The plan suggests that either a playground be provided at Pondside Park or on private land in the area shown as location number 6 on this slide. As explained in the staff report, Pondside Park is not a viable option for a playground due to its steep terrain and natural features. Therefore, in order to achieve the objectives of the Parks and Rec Master Plan, the city would either need to identify an alternative location for a playground or acquire the playground to be provided as part of this rezoning application. The staff recommendation includes a requirement that staff first seek endorsement from council through the Park, Trail, and Recreation Committee on this playground location before advancing it to first reading. The Parks and Rec Master Plan also shows a desire for a beach to mountain trail network as shown on this slide. So that would be starting at the Pondside Park and Propeller Place and ending at Madrona Bank Park before continuing down to Latoria Road. The applicant has indicated that this trail connection might not be feasible specifically at the northwest corner of their site due to the riparian area down there in the steep grades. And therefore they're not proposing to provide this trail connection. Similar to the previous slide, we'll be making a recommendation to the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee and Council on an alternative route connection that can still meet the objectives of this requirement. And lastly, the Parks and Rec Master Plan also requires a neighborhood connector route to be provided heading from alongside the North Latoria Creek Park, indicated by the red dotted line at the bottom of the screen. Similar to the previous issues with steep grades and environmental features, that trail connection might not be feasible in this location. And so the applicant has indicated that they're not able to achieve that connectivity that was originally envisioned by the Parks Plan. To achieve the objectives of the Parks Plan, alternative trail connections for this one will also need to be explored with the Parks Department and brought forward to the Park Trails and Rec Committee as well as Council for endorsement before we advance this application too far forward. So the recommendation in the staff report reflects this requirement, and we'll be working with the applicant and the Parks Department to come up with an alternative solution for this as well before we advance this to first reading. With respect to the communication for this application, the applicant has led neighborhood consultation in January and February earlier this year. The development notification sign was also posted on the property in February, and before the application advances to first reading, the neighboring properties will be notified in the mail by postcards, and advertisements will be published in the Coldstream Gazette. So the staff recommendation is to rezone the subject property to permit the additional 18 units, so increasing from 59 to 77, as well as to permit attached housing and duplex use, subject to the conditions that are described in the staff report. Other options that are before you are shown on this slide, and I'd be happy to amend these as seen fit by the Planning and Land Use Committee. I think that's all for me. The applicant is also here tonight and will be presenting to you as well, and we're both available if you have any questions afterwards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Desiree. Appreciate that. We do have the applicants here as well. I believe Ivana and Ivana, I'm going to butcher your name. I'm sorry, Kavarchuk, and Mike Wignall, of course. So if you're ready to go. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. There we go. There, that's better. Mr. Chairman, members of committee, I'm going to pull back a bit from this microphone. Okay, my name is Mike Wignall. I'm with Westbrook Consulting. I'm here tonight on behalf of the ownership group for the property in question. The current proposal represents a long-awaited final chapter in a project that the owners purchased in 1998. I'm sure they never anticipated a final build-out time of over 25 years, but here we are. Market conditions, COVID, evolving planning requirements, other issues. The intention here is to develop the last area left on the property. It was cleared and left as a rock stockpile about 7 years ago. I don't think anybody expected it to remain in the shape that it's in to this day. In essence, the rezoning is an amendment to allow us to build clustered housing in groups of 3 or more, or to allow duplex units in the undeveloped portion of the site. There is one single family lot proposed adjacent to 3642 Ridgeview Terrace. The rules in this lot will be exactly the same as for every other lot in the first phase of the project. A single family dwelling with allowance for a suite. Now, location. Here we go. So the site's located immediately south of Elevation Point Terrace, as Desiree has already said. It's shown in yellow on this slide. You can see Latoria Road slightly to the north, Royal Bay to the east, and Veterans Memorial Parkway to the northwest. This is a zoomed in version of the location plan. Originally, the entire site fronted on Latoria Road, hence the address of 517 Latoria Road. As the first phase was developed, the remaining undeveloped piece is still referred to as 517 Latoria Road, even though it no longer directly borders Latoria Road. So that little bit of addressing bureaucracy was a source of confusion for some of the neighbors as they assumed the site was on Latoria Road. This is a tighter version of the site. North is to the right on this picture. You can see Bezanton Way winding up from Latoria up towards the site. Elevation Point Terrace runs in this slide up and down to the right of the site. Madrona Creek is to the west of the site or top of the picture. And Propeller Place is at the bottom of the picture to the east of the site. The site history, let's just back that up. As I said earlier, the ownership group has owned the property since 1998. Phase 1 was completed in 2017. And phase 2, the current phase, we've been working on it since 2017, trying to come up with a version that makes sense from a feasibility point of view and an approvals point of view, et cetera. In the intervening years, we've spent a lot of time with the ownership group, City of Colwood staff, project arborist, the landscape architect, the biologist. We've also enlisted the help of a traffic consultant and a sharp-tailed snake specialist along the way. We've employed the site adaptive planning principles. We've done a natural assets inventory. We've looked to protect habitat areas. We look to incorporate existing natural features. We have, we're going to retain the tree buffers, going to minimize ecosystem disturbance, going to maintain water flow pathways. So the first issue is it's shown as North Latoria Creek here, but I believe it's actually named Madrona Creek. It's shown in blue in the plan, and that's sort of our first constraint towards the top of the picture. From Madrona Creek, there's a 30-meter riparian assessment area established, which is the yellow line. So if we're closer than 30 meters, we have to do the riparian areas process. If we stay out of it, we don't have to. Having said that, we did have our biologists identify the streamside protection and enhancement area, which is the no-go zone around the creek, and that was set at the 10 meters. Our arborist and our biologist established the vegetation line, which is also shown in yellow, sort of close to the 30-meter riparian setback, as well as along the east side of the site, towards the middle to the bottom of the screen. And then here we are with the topography. So you can see the various constraints sort of encircle the site. The middle, where it's, you know, blasted rock stockpile, is free of encumbrances. You'll note the land slopes steeply upward from Latoria Creek or Madrona Creek up to sort of a plateau area where we have the phase 2 labeled, where we would have the proposed development. And then there's sort of another height of land on the east end of the property in the do not disturb zone that sort of provides a natural topographical buffer from Propeller Place. Here is the current layout or the proposed layout of the site. As I mentioned before, we have one single family lot located sort of in the middle upper of the screen. That is intended to fit into the existing neighborhood. The rest of the site is 44 townhouse units proposed. Here's a cleaner version without the contours. As Desiree says, we're proposing 15,500 square meters of open space, which is a little over 50% of the project area. We had 2 community meetings. We've worked with the team, as I say, since 2017, and following our initial application being made, we went through several tweaks and adjustments, and we're convinced in the viability and the technical feasibility of the proposed development. We felt it was time to go to the neighborhood to show them our proposal. Okay, so we hand delivered notices to the area shown in pink in the plan there. We covered Bezanton Way, Kaiser Lane, Ridge Point Place, Elevation Point Terrace, Ridgeview Terrace, and Propeller Place. We had 2 meetings. One was on January 24th And we had a follow-up on February 12th, both at, I said Wishart Elementary School, but the one right out here, it might be, I think it's called Wishart. Attendance at both meeting was about 30 to 40 people. There is a number of concerns raised. There is a concern about loss of privacy for existing residents. There was concern about the density being too high. There was concern with traffic generated by the development and also the amount of visitor parking that we were proposing. There was questions about impacts of the existing trees and Madrona Creek. There is concerns about emergency vehicles accessing the site, as well as our on-site road design. As it was the middle of winter and we just had a big snowstorm, one of the concerns was what is our plan for snow removal? It's a question about park dedication. Are we dedicating park? Also, can we have a playground? We'd like to put a playground on the property. The neighbors would. And of course, there is concern about construction, disruption, and dust control. So little zoom in on the site. Up at the top is the concerns. So the privacy issues, there was concerns that we originally had 4 units backing directly on the existing lots on the east end of Elevation Point. So sort of on the lower right of that screen where you see units 1, 2, and 3 now. We used to have units 1, 2, 3, and 4 all lined up against that property line to the north. So we've eliminated 1 unit and rotated the others to bring them further away to improve the privacy for those 2 lots. There was also similar concerns amongst the 2 houses on Elevation Point, sort of in the middle of the screen on the right-hand side, from units 31 to 34. And again, we have them fairly close to the rear yards. We've twisted them around a bit and moved them away. I'm just going to jump ahead quickly and then jump back, but we've done a cross section of what that would look like. So this is a section through our site and into the existing houses, and the existing houses are on the right and our site is on the left. And you see there's quite a grade difference. So it's not like we're going to be peering in their windows or anything like that. And the owners have met with the owners of those 2 lots. And I think they have resolved or addressed their concerns. There was also concern that we originally had a townhouse unit on the fee simple lot next to 3642 Ridgeview. As I've said earlier, we changed this from a townhouse block of 2 to just a single family dwelling. So this is just going to be another house in the neighborhood. It is topographically separated from the rest of the site, and then it's quite a bit lower. So it just seems like a natural to just make this visually a single family lot to address on its own. For density, yeah, there's concern that phase 2 was originally expected to be 27 additional single family lots with suites. The original 27 lot layout would have caused more disruption to the existing forest surrounding the site because you're into larger footprints. It would also potentially generate traffic from not just 27 houses, but 27 suites as well, if every house was suited. So while people are concerned that 44 townhouse units is quite a bit larger than the 27 lots proposed, in terms of traffic flow and units, I think we're going to be less because there will not be suites and townhouse units. We've also had our traffic consultant review the latest proposal as well as earlier ones which had more units, and no issues were found. The roads were not being over trafficked, and the intersection down at Bezanton and Latoria was not at a point where it needed a signalized intersection or anything like that. We also had an issue with visitor parking, and initially we had 6 visitor parking stalls proposed. we've now got, we've moved things around a bit, and we've got it up to 13 visitor parking stalls. And you can see them labeled on the plan there in little groupings. We've also been able to shift some of the units further away from the road to be able to generate some room to park cars on the driveways in addition to the garages. The impacts to existing trees in Madrona Creek, as shown already, we're not impacting existing trees other than about 3 that are around units 1, 2, and 3, which conflict with it. But the vast majority of the trees, we're not touching them. The only issue would be if they're declining or dead and they present a danger, we will have them removed. But if we don't have to remove them, the preference will be to convert them into wildlife trees if they're not living anymore. Madrona Creek, as I said, it's 30 meters or more from any disturbance, so it will not be impacted by the development. The emergency vehicle access and on-site road design. The 6-meter wide road width is in accordance with the National Building Code standards for two-way traffic. Generally speaking, townhouse developments always involve 6-meter wide roads. There is concern expressed existing Bezanton Road was too narrow at a bend near the site. We visited the site and confirmed that the existing pavement width is adequate for 2 vehicles to pass going different directions. Visually, I agree, it looks very tight, but I would suggest this is a perfect example of traffic calming, because as you approach it, you slow down, which is probably a good plan on a curve on a hill. And I would suggest it works quite well. Again, emphasizing that's a pre-existing situation, but the residents were concerned that that would become a further pinch point for the neighborhood when the new houses came on. There was also concern that drivers of vehicles exiting our site would not be stopping at elevation point and would cause traffic conflict or accidents. To address this concern, in addition to the usual stop sign, we're proposing a private driveway drop style entrance exit to give a better visual cue to the drivers that they're now entering a public roadway or a private driveway, depending on which way they're going. So it won't appear like a regular municipal intersection. It's clearly coming from a driveway onto a roadway. We also plan to install an asphalt water control or ridge to help direct drainage from the north part of the road there into the nearest catch basin. But that water control ridge will also force drivers to slow down as they go over it. There is concern about emergency vehicles not being able to navigate the site. We have run City of Colwood Fire Department vehicle turning paths on our design, and we've confirmed that even a large Colwood fire truck can turn around in the turnaround area provided around units 31, 32, 26, 27, 35, that sort of T-type area. For snow removal, we've identified an area to the east of unit 34, but down at the road level to the east of it, so that any snow accumulated and plowed around can be piled up in an area set aside for it to melt and dissipate in that location. Park dedication, we are not proposing to dedicate park, but rather to covenant green space for retention. This way, the City of Colwood is not responsible for ongoing maintenance, but will have a right-of-way over the lands to enable the city staff to ensure the green space is being properly maintained, and there will be a Section 219 covenant on the strata to ensure that it is maintained. We're also not proposing a playground, and I don't want people to think that we're being minimalist here, but a playground on a strata site could be a problem. It's an insurance and a liability issue. And so for one thing, it's a burden on the future strata as well. When it's in the middle of a neighborhood, in theory, you should only have people with the strata using the playground. And yet, you know, all the neighborhood kids will be on it, and that's going to be a source of conflict. And I can see there being a fight with the strata and with the neighborhood, sadly. So in order to keep it simple, we're looking at the existing residents, the new ones now, and I guess what I heard about the trail down to Latoria Creek Park, maybe we need to look at, but the thinking was that there will be a new elementary school constructed on Royal Bay, not too far away. And that will be a public piece of property with its own playground structure. And we thought that would be a better, a safer and easier to administer place to put it. And then finally, construction traffic and dust control. In this case, you know, there was a lot of blasting involved with the first phase, but the good news is that there really isn't significant blasting required here because everything's already been done already. There might be some blasting for trenches, a little bit of detail blasting, but generally the heavy work is done. All nearby residents will be contacted by the blasting company when the time comes for a pre-blast assessment to ensure that all concerns are noted and the blast can be controlled accordingly. Also, we don't anticipate hauling large quantities of rock off-site or on-site as we intend to use the material already stockpiled there. There will be trucks arriving with supplies, lumber, pipe, etc. However, unlike the fee simple subdivision, which this could have been, where each lot is potentially an independent builder, the strata development will be under the control of one general contractor, and as such, control of construction traffic can be coordinated through that general contractor. We have enough room on the site that off-site parking of construction vehicles will not be required. Dust control in the summer months can be problematic, but again, with a single general contractor and a single point of contact, dust control can be maintained and monitored. So that's it with what we have. We really think that we're trying to clean up what's been an eyesore for 7 years or more. And we think this is a reasonable development. We think that it's, you know, the concerns about the density, we don't feel obviously the density is excessive. We think it's a reasonable use for the property and is, I think, a great example of site adaptive planning to cluster the development within the already disturbed areas and leaving the natural attributes of this site as they are. So that's it for me. I've answered any questions if you have them.
Great, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. At this point, I will look to the committee to direct any questions to either the city through Desiree or through the proponents through Mr. Wignall. And I see a question from committee member Donny. You have the floor.
Thank you. This question is for both the city and the developer. The first question I want to ask is in terms of the evolution of this particular development and the proposals that you have made. When it started out, when you applied to the city, did you convey the fact that a playground was not feasible? And also, did you convey it's probably not the proper term, but the upselling, i.e. the notion that it would originally have been single family dwellings, and then we've changed our plan and we're going to move to presumably higher density. And I do understand your point in terms of townhouses don't get suites, so that speaks to the density, but I'm trying to get a chronology here. Was a playground ever in the plan? And again, Ms. Gibbons, I would like to hear your input too, because I want to hear from both parties. So I want to understand how this all evolved.
I'm going back a long ways here, and I started out working on the project in the early 2000s, and then the project evolved, and at one point I had a project manager working for me who ran with the project for about, I guess, a decade. So I recently, in the last few years, come back involved in it. So going from my memory, because I wasn't directly involved in the first phase, there was a layout that had single family housing up into this phase 2 land. And there was some areas of park that smaller areas of park that were saving sort of to the east and the higher areas of the site. I don't recall, I think it was clearly identified as park, But I don't recall there being discussions of a playground, but Desiree might be able to clarify that. As for when did the townhouses come up, that was fairly recently. We, as I was getting back involved with it, the ownership wanted to move on and get the project done. And the original, the 27 units or whatever it was, they just couldn't, they weren't feasible cost wise to make it work. And then we were tasked with, well, what can we get? How many more units can we get? And then we had, there was some, let's call it confusion with previous Colwood staff where at one point, one of your contract planners, as I understand it, suggested it may be a multifamily building as part to make up the numbers. And so we sort of went down that rabbit hole for a while and then realized that that wasn't going to fly. So there was a number of versions of this, but as we were getting into the townhouse option was about when you guys were getting further into the site adaptive planning. And honestly, in my opinion, I think it's a much better use for the land that we've got, but I'll defer to Desiree for the bits that I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, so I can speak a little bit to the requirement for the playground, and since we received the application in October 2023, so during the review and referral process, we did request the amenity, the playground to be provided. It is a condition in the existing original development agreement for the site. So when the property was first rezoned, one of the items that they negotiated with council was to provide a playground amenity and a parks plan for the entire development. That I believe that requirement has not been met to date and has not been provided in the first phase of development. So we had requested that it be provided somewhere in this phase so that it doesn't and so that doesn't compromise the environmentally sensitive areas. So we understand that a playground amenity is not feasible in a strata development, or creates a little bit of complexities and challenges with enabling public use of a private piece of land. So that part was fine. And we had also discussed options to maybe provide the playground amenity in the fee simple lot where the single family house is being developed. So these things are still being negotiated with the developer, and we'll be meeting with the Parks Department to kind of explore other options, including maybe potentially providing it on the property, or maybe finding a different location somewhere in the surrounding area that would work better, given the site challenges with this particular lot. I understand that based on the letter of rationale from the applicant, they are putting a park on that fee simple lot could create challenges with materials entering into the riparian area. So, and the steep terrain of that lot as well. But these are things that we need to be confirmed through studies, and so we'll have that information available hopefully before we go to the Parks, Trails and Recreation Committee.
Is the option of having a playground facility for the public at that new elementary school a valid one? I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that situation, but is that something that the city has yet considered?
Yeah, I think, yes, the Parks and Rec Master Plan does already contemplate a playground in there. So we'd be looking to see a playground amenity in addition to the one that's proposed at the elementary school, because that's what the Parks and Rec Master Plan calls for. It's 2 playground sites. So we can't say that that requirement has been met based off of the playground that's being provided there.
Right. So to clarify, in 2023, the original application to you was for the 27 single family units, and then it was revised
No, it would have
No,
been for the
way back.
originally they came in for a 48 townhome development proposal, and they've reduced it to 44 units.
Okay. And I think I need to speak to the developer then about the proposed use, if you don't mind. Thank you, Ms. Gibbons. Yes, thank you.
That would be the developer's consultant.
The developer's consultant. Well, you are the
Could-
developer technically because you're
Okay.
acting for.
Yeah,
them,
actually,
as
I'm the
their agent,
applicant. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So just if I may, just before you ask that question, I just want to emphasize as well on that, what would be a fee simple lot? Yes, it was looked at as a park and it was also looked at as a trail connection. But it is a very steep piece of property going down into the ravine where Madrona Creek is. And for a trail, we think it would be not feasible. Plus there's strata developments in the other side of the creek that now you're leading people to a private property again. So that's a bit of a problem. Then to put a playground in, you would have to do quite a bit of leveling in there. And the only way you're gonna get level ground in there is with the big retaining wall. And then I worry about kids being kids and big retaining walls, you know, how long before somebody figures you can climb the fence and climb down, you know, it's kids have imaginations.
Oh, thank you for that information. That's helpful. I'm trying to establish if representations were made by the developer, your client, in terms of this unit, phase 2, will be single family units. Was there ever any kind of
Way back. Yeah, no,
What was the-
definitely.
What was the form of that representation?
There is a report, just excuse me a sec.
Thank you.
On one of these supporting documents that I read today, there was a black and white sketch on the back of it. This is a little bit clunky, sorry, but maybe this is it. Anyways, it went up. Yeah, I don't know if I can find it off the top of my head, but the road access, if you can picture, maybe we can get the slide back up with just the site layout. That one's fine. Yeah. So the fee simple plan involved the main access being from elevation point on the the west side and going up that way. And then there was a road that went almost north-south straight through there. And then the single family lots would be westward of that. So they'd be further into the riparian area. And it would be a straight road going through. And I think we had a T intersection that sort of wound around back. Again, with more 90 degrees and public roads and stuff. So it would take up the public road, you take up a bigger swath. You're taking up 15, 18, maybe 20 meters of road allowance. Plus you have lots. And it just, you know, it would have pushed everything, the footprint outwards all around. So I'll see if I can find in the back one of these reports, because I did read it today. It was an older report I was looking at. Oh, that's, you know, I hadn't seen that for a while.
I'd like to push this a little bit just because I think this is important to many of the residents. So what I'm trying to grasp is what the purchasers of the lots, I suppose mostly on elevation point, because they're phase 1. Can I call elevation point phase 1 of the same project? And
Sure.
they interact
Yep.
with the same developer or developers. So when they purchased their lot, was there, oh, we have, pardon me?
I found it here.
And that is attached to what specifically?
It's the back of the legal document, the covenant, and
The covenant with the city?
with the city, and it shows, yeah, I was a little bit off on that, but it shows, sorry for the audience, you can't see this, but that's Bezanton coming along, and this is about where Elevation Point Terrace is now, but
Yes.
there is actually 2 cul-de-sacs coming in. And this was one of a couple of park areas, and it does say tot lot. So
Okay.
at that point, there would have been an expectation of a tot lot.
And what period of time is that? When was that covenant signed? When did it come into effect?
2017.
2017. And then when the developer marketed phase 2, did it make reference to those single family
There-
units?
There wasn't really marketing of phase 2 because we're on phase 2 now. So there.
I'm sorry, phase 1, I apologize. When the developer was marketing phase 1, what did the purchasers?
I don't know what they were showing, but that was the plan that was the plan for
The plan
phase
approved
1,
by the
phase 2.
city.
So if they were showing the future, it probably would have shown that. Yeah.
Okay, Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? I see Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up quick question regarding the playground, and I don't want to, beat a dead horse a little bit here, but is the idea that if they determine of not having the playground in the development, is the developer willing to like help fund the cost of that other playground in the other location? Is that what the agreement is being suggested? Is that my understanding? Yeah, I just wanted to be sure I understood what the trade-off was. Okay.
And one of the options that we can recommend is additional cash and lieu on top of what I believe.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe actually Desiree, perhaps you can speak to the, I know there's options in the recommendations and can provide some clarity for the committee on that. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. So the recommend, or the trade-off would be that the developer is providing community amenity contributions to support the creation of this new park, whether it be on their property or whether it be in an alternative location that will be negotiating at a later date. But if they do not move forward with this rezoning, or if this application is not advanced, then the city will not be collecting the additional, I can't remember what the exact amount is, but I think it's in the financial contribution table. We won't be collecting those additional community amenity contributions, so that won't go towards building a new park.
That's the follow-up question. My mic's still on? Okay. I know it's part of the rezoning and I'm probably getting a little bit into the details. Do you have, in terms of the approximate size that we're looking at these units, the townhomes that we're looking at, just trying to understand the scale? I realize it's rezoning. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so.
I'm gonna take an educated guess and say about 1,800 square feet.
Okay, so they're decent size.
Yeah.
Probably three and a half bedroom, 4 bedrooms type.
You're pushing me, but I guess,
Okay.
yeah.
No, 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 it just helps me understand what the overall objective of the development is supposed to be. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, sir, if I could ask you to come to the microphone, then it's a matter of public record, please. Thank you. If you could just announce who you are, that would be wonderful.
And the button is, okay. Marcelo Save, I'm 530 Bezanton Way. And just, I didn't look at it, the picture of the old, I'm also a phase 1 owner. And out of the 27 units, looks like based on the map that I just saw, 5 of them are already built. So we're looking at adding only 22 new units, detached homes. That's I think that's an important observation. That was it.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the committee has any other questions at all. I see James. Or sir?
Thank you. A couple housekeeping items. First and foremost, just want to say thank you for all the public participation. Public engagement is absolutely crucial to driving a strong community, and the well-articulated written submissions, the public speaking opportunities taken here are things that are extremely important to me. So thank you very much. Similarly to the developer, your public engagement and responding to the public engagement is commendable. I see that of each of the primary concerns, there was clear and direct intention to mitigate and manage all of those concerns, and that much is clear. Also, taking that site adaptive planning approach is something that should also be noted here in terms of the effort being put in on the applicant side towards building a city that fits within the nature it resides. Couple other statements. Personally, I don't see a playground being highly feasible, and a cash in lieu setup is really the best option when considering a playground. That's just my personal opinion, and that's also driven mostly on parking. If traffic is already a concern and too many people from other areas coming in, we will have to provide more parking. You'll see more traffic of those who don't know the area and the traffic concerns. And then finally, I know I'm doing a lot of grandstanding right now, but with respect to some of the concerns brought forward in the written submission around the proximity that some of those vehicles will face with each other driving through Bezanton, I know that's not part of the exact application for rezoning, but something I'd like to figure out on how to properly put it into record and ask of the city to look into is managing the traffic on Bezanton Way, not necessarily in this particular lot. It's clearly an area of concern. And speaking on areas of concern, the trail feasibility discussion is something that I'd like to understand. Clearly, there's unfinished trails as well as a lot of public individuals that are trying to find alternatives based on the lack of trails. And when speaking to the site adaptive planning and a city that fits within the ecology it resides, I'd like to understand why it's considered unfeasible to introduce proper or rather improved trails throughout the area. So I don't know if Desiree, I know that you, as part of your presentation, brought up the feasibility concerns, but I also know that the applicant was the one saying that it's not feasible. So could you speak to why we can't put the trails in as recommended by the OCP?
Just two quick comments on that. I do strongly believe that the trail isn't feasible where it's been discussed. There's another location at the southeast corner of the site where we have looked at a potential trail route that would connect with Olympic View to the south. We walked it with, I think it was Desiree and the Parks Department. And when we walked it, I think it was sort of, we have to get back to you because it wasn't clear yet on what Olympic View's plans were in that area, but it's certainly feasible. I think you'd have to put a public right of way over the Strata Road for that portion because the public would be walking on it, but it's doable physically.
And established within the local neighborhood.
It would be, yeah, it would be within the local neighborhood. Now, Desiree, as she's mentioned, there's also, she wants us to go further with the Parks Committee and how things fit with the Parks Master Plan. I think a lot of the answers to your question will come out of those discussions.
Yes, and I thank you for bringing that up because that was one final piece that I wanted to reinforce as part of the recommendation from staff is also an endorsement from the Trails and Parks Committee, which I think will be a really interesting conversation as that unfolds.
It will be a really practical, from the city's point of view, review of what we've got and what our constraints are and what the city needs.
And while you're standing there on each of these proposed strata lots, how much parking are you anticipating to be provided for the residents?
I think it's 2 per dwelling, just
I assume as much.
two garage parking per dwelling. And some of the driveways will have room to park cars on as well. But the requirement, I believe, is two per unit. And the 13 parking spaces we're providing now, we had originally based it on being 6 because that's what we understood the parking ratio was required. But of course, the neighborhood looks at it and says, well, I don't care what the specs are. 6 isn't enough. And so we looked to figure out how we could get more.
Yeah, and again, that speaks to the responding to public concern. From my perspective, this checks all the boxes. We see the OCP as the driving directive for this committee. I see a site adaptive plan responding to public participation. And again, really do want to emphasize how important that is to me. The one thing that is a very big sticking point is the fact that it's a rezoning after a comprehensive development application was approved. And when buying in an active development area, you're buying into a promise and a vision of the future. So to have that vision stripped and refocused into a different vision is something that is a hard pill to swallow for anyone who thought they were getting one thing and getting something different. So for that reason, it is of course, a very big decision and something that's hard to reconcile when all the other things have been managed as well as you managed. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, James. I see green lights, I think. Trina. There you go.
Thank you very much. I won't go through everything. I support what our fellow committee member James has indicated, so I won't reiterate a lot of the good points that he made. The one thing that I would like to, it's a little bit frivolous, but I would like to commend Ms. Woodland in her document that she did give us. She was thinking outside the box when she suggested that perhaps, on this site, something interesting could be done, like a viewing platform. Of course, they come with all their own issues as well, but if we're looking at a different route for a connector and no park, perhaps something interesting like a viewing platform might be taken under consideration. So Desiree, I'd perhaps like you to forward that information on when we're speaking to parks people. I'm not familiar with the one over in Outlook Townhouses, but I will be making a trip over there just to see what your vision may have entailed. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Kathleen.
This is a question for Ms. Gibbons. I'm wondering if the city has ever endorsed and followed through with a proposal with a strata complex, which did have a public amenity within it. Has that ever been done? Is there precedent for that?
Thank you. I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. Yeah, in my time, I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been done. I'm sure that it maybe has been contemplated in the past, but I'm not sure I have an answer to that question. Apologize.
I ask because it strikes me as a very unusual arrangement. And I would be surprised if there was, for example, a playground or some kind of public amenity within a private development or private strata.
Yeah, here we go. We do have our parks manager online, Gord Belleville. He can probably answer that question if Estrada's Park has been there. So maybe I can ask Gord to just speak up. And no, he's been here quite a while as well, so he might have a little more history than Desiree.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you, Gord.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. To my knowledge, we do not have the only thing that we would have over Strata would be a right of way to access a trail that was spoken to before. But as far as an amenity like a park or a playground, to my knowledge, we don't have anything like that, or nor have we in the past. If that answers your question.
Thank you. And if I could ask a follow-up, in terms of a right of way, when that covenant is arranged, has there ever been a situation where the city agrees to take on the maintenance of a particular right of way or indemnify the property holders, anything like that?
We do have rights of way where we do maintain some of the right of way if it's like a connector or a trail, but those are negotiated when we do the actual right of ways.
Okay, thank you very much. So the reason I belabored that point is I would be surprised to see a strata development that would take on a public amenity of that nature. And I have to say, it's particular. I mean, it obviously is a source of conflict, but also the liability issue is an acute one, because what it does is it deprives the strata corporation of the ability to limit its liability under the Occupiers Liability Act. So, and this is very technical, but just so all of you understand this, there are two levels. And if you've all seen the no trespassing signs that nobody obeys, but they're there for a good reason, and it's to protect the strata from the liability, so that if somebody from outside of the strata comes onto the property and something happens to that individual, there is lower liability for that individual. So if you have a playground or a public amenity in a strata development, then you've essentially robbed that strata of the ability to protect itself from liability. And I don't know how much extra that would be for insurance, but it does strike me as a very odd thing to do. And just wanted to enlighten everybody in terms of that particular issue on liability. It's just it's a lot to ask of a strata. And I speak for those who aren't here because nobody's purchased yet. And I think a lot of times you see in strata developments is that the people who buy kind of are stuck with something they never knew they would get into. So that's one I want to just speak to the feasibility issues on the playground. I just don't think it's fair to make a strata pay for that when they don't realize it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I'm sorry, I see a hand raised back there, but at this point, we're not going to do public participation. I'd like to keep it to the rules at hand. If I may speak briefly, I think some very good questions from the committee members. Some great feedback from the folks who've taken the time out this evening to come and share your sentiments on this. And the written submissions, very comprehensive. Anytime anybody makes that level of effort, I'm certainly very appreciative. I've been on the other side of the table not all that long ago and very similar issues. So, I understand how personal it can be, and emotional as well at times. There's a number of points I think I need to make. One is that if I view this in isolation, it's a great project. And I say that because it ticks a lot of boxes in that, from an environmental standpoint, for example, from a site adaptive standpoint, it's doing everything that we want in the OCP, right? It's keeping much of the natural area intact. It's in the area that's already been disturbed. And that's what we aim for. Certainly from an environmental standpoint, it's about minimizing the impact. In fact, it minimizes the impact on the site. It's better for the site in many ways than the original single family home development. And I know there's a few people doing an intake of breath at the moment. Where's he going with this? I don't like it. But that's just the reality. And I'm compelled to take the emotion out of it. I have to make decisions for 20,000 people, not 20 people. So when I view it in isolation, that's a real factor for me. I do also note that, with the 27 original single family homes that were planned, each designed to host a suite, you have the potential for up to 54 homes, if you will. Now, realistically, that's not going to be the case, right? Half those homes maybe are going to use those suites for media rooms or family or what have you. So if we reduce that by 50%, now we're down to about 40 homes. But we're comparable to the 44 homes of this current proposal. So aesthetically, it's very different. Let's be honest, single family homes look very different than a denser development. But increasingly, we realize that density allows us to preserve the environmental aspect of Colwood and the tree canopy, and to minimize the impact and leave more green space. So that is a consideration, albeit as unpopular as it might be. Traffic, I think it's worth mentioning that, Bezanton as it stands is already a bit of a traffic nightmare at key times of the day. I don't need to tell people in the audience that, turning out there during key times is challenging. Will continue to be that way. Will probably get worse, but there are plans in the future to add a controlled intersection there, be it a roundabout or a traffic light. Something will have to give eventually. There's strong likelihood of development across the road on the other side of Latoria, maybe another entry into there. So eventually that will have to be addressed. So it's hard to, you have to consider the short term, but we have to look at the long term, that even if we didn't build a single thing on Bezanton, sooner or later, the good folks who live there are going to need a controlled intersection to get out, or you'd be waiting there all day. The trail feasibility and the playground piece, I don't want to get too hung up on it, but I think it's a key component. Trail connectivity throughout Colwood is something we're aiming to achieve. And in some ways, I feel like we put the cart before the horse by having this before us this evening. I would have liked to have seen a proposal from the Parks Committee. I would have liked to have seen a plan that said, this is how we're going to mitigate that. This is how we're going to address that. So that's something that matters to me. Lastly, I also note that with this proposed rezoning, we go from what's allowable from 59 units up to 77. And I mean, I don't think anybody wants to see 59 units on that site, let alone 77. So where I end my diatribe here is with concern for what could be. And I don't, obviously I know Mr. Wignall is a very reputable guy. I think the developers would probably follow through with this, but having lived next to a bait and switch kind of property, it concerns me that if we forge ahead with the rezoning, we don't know what could happen. The future, is changeable, and economic conditions change, and people could decide, hey, we're going to sell this site. And then the next developer comes in and says, well, hey, I know it's zoned for 77, but we're going to be really nice, and we're going to settle at 68. And somebody else is going to have to deal with that battle down the road. So those are issues. Those are the community oriented issues that concern me. Again, from an OCP standpoint, and from a we need homes in this community and aesthetic standpoint, I like this development in isolation. I don't want to say no to it, but I think we have to proceed cautiously, in how we approach it. I would like to see it come before council to have discussion, but I would like to see it in its completed form. I want to see where we go with this trail connectivity and the park piece, and to see what other fine tuning we could put on it. I think we've heard from the community. We know it's never going to be well loved, and I don't think we're going to get that point, but I think we have to get to a point where there's at least reluctant acceptance. And that's sort of my bit. I know, Mr. Wignall, I can see you raising your hand there. Maybe I can invite you up one more time if you wanted to address what I'm speaking to here.
Thank you. I just want to be clear that the 59 units and the 77 units are for the entire CD zone. So those units are already exist in phase one. I wasn't sure if that was clear or not. So it's not like there'd ever be a circumstance where there'd be 77 new units. It would just be 77 minus what we've got now leaves 44. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarity. So at this point, I'm not entirely certain where I sit, I'll be honest with you. So I would look to the committee to see if there's further comments or anyone who wishes to propose a motion.
I'd just like to further discussion. I agree with your comments, Councillor Ward. I mean, it's a challenge because it's never going to be 100% popular. But in terms of what the OCP wants, it's clear cut that this density is desirable. And I just don't know at what point do we say for all of these applications that come in front of us, do we continue to say no? And I wish I had more information in terms of, was an actual representation made to the phase one purchasers? Legally, do they have a claim? What were they told? Was it kind of a salesperson's pitch, or was it literally, we promise you this is all it's going to be. It's going to be low density. And I'm struck by the fact that we all have to live with the legislation that's in front of us. The government has made it clear that density is required. We have an affordability crisis. We have a housing crisis. So I don't think the park is feasible at all. I do think that we want to encourage a connector, perhaps in a different location. I do respect the fact of the very challenging terrain, but I think we want to encourage some kind of amendment to the particular plan, such that we can put as much in that makes sense for the community in terms of a connector and some kind of public access way. But if I were forced to decide today, I would decide for it just because of all of the points that everyone has made. We have reservations, and I kind of wish I had a better sense of what phase one was led to believe, and was the city led to believe as well. This is it. And then you have, you know, legislation that comes into the fore and things change. And that's just the way that it is. So I'm on the yes side. I would suggest that we perhaps look into beefing up the playground amenity, because I just don't see it as being feasible. But I think it should go ahead.
Thank you. James.
Absolutely agree. With respect to making a motion, I'd like to come forward with at least something that I think that we can agree with here. One of the options included a additional cash in lieu for the park. I think that we are all in favor of that, seeing as park on location doesn't seem reasonable. The request for more information around the phasing, since that was the biggest sticking point for me personally, is something that I think should be created and brought forward to council. We have to remember we are a committee, not council after all. So at least we're providing that best foot forward. And then finally, knowing that the endorsement, while would have been nice to have already from the Trails Committee, that is included in this recommendation. So the staff recommendation that includes the additional cash in lieu for a playground, as well as requesting more information surrounding what communications and promises, et cetera, were involved with the phasing approach to the comprehensive development. And then with the Trails Committee bringing that forward to council for reading and consideration.
James, for
I don't know how
the-
to form that.
Well, I was going to say, for the benefit of administration, I think you're looking at option 3 on the original report, which, for clarity for the folks in the audience, option 3 speaks to everything you just spoke to, which would be, and I won't read the whole thing, but it would direct staff to prepare the land use bylaw number 151, 1989 with the amendment. But it would stipulate that prior to it essentially coming before council, that the Park Trail and Recreation Committee would have to agree upon an option that would achieve the objectives of the Park and Recreation Master Plan. And I'm reading it off my screen and realize it's right up in front of me. So there you go. I think it's important to note that, again, as committee member Perry mentioned, just one second here, is that we are a committee, so we're not making a decision on it this evening. And I think that's the important thing for the folks who've come out to, to raise their concerns or come out and support and speak to it, as Mr. Wignall has, is that we would be putting this forward to council. And ultimately, the final decision will rest there. I think we have a duty to arrive at a decision and to either move something forward or send it back. That is the purpose of the committee. But it is also to add in, additional layers. And in this case, I think the Parks and Trail and Recreation component is one of those layers. But with respect to Mr. Perry, who had the floor, I'll turn back to him here for a moment and see if this is indeed the motion you're looking for.
Option 3 is the framework or basis of my recommendation. I am, in addition to what option 3 is requesting, also requesting more information surrounding the history of what the phase approach was sold to be, since the rug pull is a very real concern.
That's fair. I don't know, Amanda, if you're able to add that, that would be seeking additional information for council on the history of the comprehensive development plan, as it relates to I guess we'll call it phase one home buyers. Is
Yeah,
that
well, the phased approach
The
to
phased
the
approach.
comprehensive development.
just some additional background, I believe?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just wait to confirm that we've got the motion captured. No pressure, Amanda. I would say on the historical representations of the comprehensive development plan, if you agree, Mr. Perry.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion before us, so I will call a vote. All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is passed. We will move on to item 5.2. I will call upon Desiree Gibbons to speak to OCP amendment and rezoning application RZ quadruple 010 for 586 and 588 Latoria Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a rezoning application for 586 and 588 Latoria Road. Just a bit of application history. This application was received by staff in April 2022. The applicant led neighborhood consultation in June of 2022, and the application underwent a referral and review period between April and October 2022, and feedback was provided in that month. A resubmission was received in early January 2023, and between then and now, the application has been on hold because the city is undergoing a visioning exercise for the Latoria, North Latoria area, which includes this property, and staff have been advising all applications within the North Latoria corridor area to postpone coming before Planning and Land Use Committee and Council for a decision until Council has made a decision on the visioning for that area. But this application, the applicant would like to come forward and is here tonight for a committee consideration and council endorsement. Just a bit of site context. So the property is located near the intersection of Veterans Memorial Parkway and Latoria Road. Shown on this screen, it is currently zoned Rural 1, A1, and it is located in 2 designations in the official community plan, including the neighborhood center and the neighborhood hillside. So the application doesn't comply with either of these 2 land use designations, and I'll kind of highlight where the application deviates from the OCP designation in the next few slides, starting with the neighborhood center designation. So in the neighborhood centers, the built form supports low-rise multi-unit residential buildings up to 4 stories at the core of the centers. The application before you tonight is for a 6-story apartment building, so it doesn't comply. The floor area ratio is permitted to go up to 1.75. The applicant is proposing a floor area ratio of approximately 1.6. So that's compliant. And then the OCP does encourage parking to be situated underground or at the rear of the buildings. And the applicant is proposing 2 stories of above ground parking as well as surface parking on the adjacent sides of on the sides neighboring the adjacent lot at 576 Latoria Road. Staff do understand that because of the site conditions, underground parking in this area could potentially be challenging. However, the OCP does call for parking to be located underground when possible. In terms of the land uses, the OCP supports small-scale neighborhoods serving retail uses. This application includes a daycare that's proposed for the ground floor, so this would be an example of a small-scale neighborhood retail serving use, and that's compliant with this neighborhood designation. It also supports a range of housing types and choices to support businesses. The proposal is for a 122-unit apartment complex, which would increase housing choices and for future residents of Colwood, and would attract attract them to use businesses in the neighborhood center designation. In terms of the public realm policy requirements of the OCP, the OCP encourages high quality public realm, including spaces for gathering, creating a high degree of permeability, including direct walking connections between the residential developments and the frequent transit network on Latoria Road. It also encourages protecting and optimizing views from public spaces such as Latoria Road. This proposal achieves all of those requirements, including that it's going to be providing frontage improvements along Latoria Road, which could potentially include sidewalks, landscaped boulevards, and a dedicated bike lane. It will also include a high degree of permeability and walking connections, in that it's proposing to provide a sidewalk that connects from the property to Veterans Memorial Parkway, as well as a direct walking connection from off to Latoria Road. Staff do not anticipate any views being impacted from public spaces, as there is quite a large setback between the proposed development and Latoria Road, established by the riparian buffer between Latoria Creek and the development. So moving on to the neighborhood hillside policies. So the neighborhood hillside designation supports low-rise buildings of no more than 6 stories in very limited situations where ecological benefits can be achieved. So the applicant is proposing to provide a combination of road dedication and statutory right-of-way along Latoria Road, which will enable the city to potentially relocate the creek further away from the road and enhance it and improve its health. So this hasn't quite been finalized. It's still under consideration by council through the updates to the transportation master plan. So if the updates to the transportation master plan do not go through, then staff do not feel that a significant ecological benefit will be achieved. However, as it stands now, realigning the creek will achieve that benefit, and this proposal does achieve this policy. The greatest concern with this proposal, though, in terms of the neighborhood hillside designation, is the floor area ratio. So in the neighborhood's hillside, the floor area ratio is allowed to go up to 1.2. As I mentioned previously, this proposal is for 1.6, so it does exceed the permitted density. And also another policy in the neighborhood hillside is to generally maintain the existing character of the surrounding single-family detached areas. So we do understand that the entire Latoria North area is coming forward for redevelopment in the coming years, but as it stands now, this proposal wouldn't maintain the existing character. I sort of went through this on the previous slide, and the policies will be the same. So improving public realm for pedestrians, creating a high degree of permeability, and protecting views, not optimizing views from public spaces. So this proposal does achieve all 3 of those objectives. And then with the neighborhood hillside policies for natural assets, similar to previous application that we just seen, the neighborhood hillside encourages a strong use of site adaptive planning principles. And the applicant has similarly retained a qualified environmental professional and arborist to map out the natural features of the site and identify buildable and non-buildable areas. And this proposal generally, or the area that's has been identified to be protected is the area around Latoria Creek, which is along the Latoria Road frontage. So the applicant is proposing to stay outside of that 30-meter riparian area assessment with this proposal. And then for the retention of 40% of the site, this is a policy that applies to only greenfield sites. This application is not located on a greenfield site. It has been previously developed, so there's limited applicability of this policy. And just in terms of the communication, the applicant did lead neighborhood consultation in June 2022, and the development notification sign was posted on the property in the fall of 2023. As I had mentioned, there is a neighborhood consultation, or sorry, there's a neighborhood visioning exercise that is being undertaken for the Latoria North area. So the staff recommendation is to postpone making a decision on this application until council first endorses one of the vision options for the area. This is partially because this visioning exercise will have significant or potentially significant implications for this proposal and may even permit what is proposed without needing to amend the OCP. So this is a staff recommendation, but if you do support the application going forward, it would require an amendment to the OCP because it does not comply with either the neighborhood hillside or neighborhood center designation. But these are the options before you. So option 2 is to revise the application so that it does comply with one of the land use designations. Option 3 would be to prepare amendments to the OCP as well as the land use bylaw to support the proposal as it has been shown. Option 4 and 5 is to deny the application or to select another option as selected by committee. And the applicant is also here tonight to provide or to present their application, and both of us will be available for questions if you have any afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Desiree. I appreciate it. As you mentioned, the applicants are here. Moji and team are here, so we welcome you forward to share.
Thank you, Counselor, and thank you, committee, for your time today, and appreciate Desiree's introduction. Just a quick tech note. I noticed that the presentation here is not the final presentation that we have for 586, 588 Latoria. I'm wondering if it's possible to showcase that presentation because it does have specific details. This was what we presented regarding the North Latoria corridor. There's a specific presentation for 586, 588 that has some critical detail, and I hope I can resend the link if that's possible.
Would it be beneficial to take a 2-minute break to facilitate that amendment? So we'll just postpone for 2 minutes, folks, and come back when we've got the updated presentation. We're okay to resume? Wonderful. Okay, I will reconvene the meeting with the presentation from the applicant, the updated presentation from the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for that technical issue. The bulk of the presentation is the same as what is in the agenda. There's just more technical slides for engineering specific to this subject property. Again, to introduce myself, my name is Ferris Kathrada, with the development manager at Parsi Developments, representing the landowners at 586 and 588 Latoria today, Moji Shahab and Bob Weeks, both of which are in attendance. This application has been underway for some time, as mentioned by Desiree. Initial submission was in April of 2022. It was postponed with the visioning exercise going into 2023 and partaking into 2024 as well. There are a couple of reasons why we requested moving this ahead of the visioning, which I will connect into. I'll do a quick introduction of the project and then talk to some of the points that Desiree mentioned at the same time. By way of quick introduction, Parsi Developments is a family-owned office operated and managed with a pretty impressive track record. Moji is the key developer, and his wife Nushin is the designer and intern architect with the team. The history of the projects that have been done have been historically in Langford, with work performed in Colwood over the last few years, starting in 2011 with 594 Latoria and moving into 586, 588 Latoria as well in, I believe, 2013 or 2014, and subsequently 568 Latoria, which we've undertaken as of 2020, the end of 2022. 594 Latoria, a little bit of history, is approved and underway for 138 unit, 8-story building. It was approved with a site-specific designation for 8 stories at the time that it was approved, and with adjustments to the OCP since then. This project is phase 2 of that project, so it tangibly blends into the proposal that happened with 594 Latoria, and then continues with some of the visioned elements that were initially presented. So a little bit about the developer. Parsi Developments began in 2005, a harvest of the award-winning Casabella project on Brock Avenue and the Piano project on Radian Way and Happy Valley Road in 2009, subsequently 2018, with projects of similar sizes to the proposed, initially at 60 condos and 12 townhouses, subsequently to 76 townhomes and 10 single families, so all family-oriented mixed-use development assets and ownership assets. Foundation of what we do is quality homes and developing communities, focusing on the amenities, focusing on developing properties and living spaces that families can be happy and proud to live in, trying to maximize the space possible for those families and provide the best amenities that we can. All previous projects have been in fully developed neighborhoods and multifamily projects, which have really been focused on visioning. In line with that, 594 Latoria at its inception was really focused on visioning the next phase of the North Latoria corridor after Latoria Walk. Our consultant team, we have our QEP, which is Aquatech Scientific, our biologists, Patrick, Lucy, and Corey Bearclaw. Westbrook Consulting is our civil engineer, Mike Wignall and Eva Kvartik, and Finlayson Bonet Architects. Sylvia Bonet is our architect. We have with us today our civil engineers from Westbrook and Patrick Lucy from Aquatech Scientific. So to get into a little bit of the commentary with alignment with the designations that Desiree was mentioning, and talking to aligning to the city planning in the future a little bit here, the proposed project generally fits within policy guidelines and planning vision. If we look to the tables that were presented in the agenda by planning, generally it did fit. There are a couple of elements highlighted, which I'll talk to, as Desiree mentioned, regarding the designations, both for neighborhood center and neighborhood hillside. So speaking first to neighborhood center designation, the initial built form item that was mentioned was up to 4 low-rise multi-unit residential up to 4 stories at the core of the centers, which has been the focus of neighborhood center. Now, this is going to 6-story. that is the proposal being placed. When we talk through the visioning that's happening, some of that visioning is entertaining and discussing six-story as well. So I will, align with Desiree in that the visioning exercise is going to potentially six-story. However, based on 594 Latoria's approval and based on 594 Latoria as well being a neighborhood center and having the approval at 8-story, we feel that going to 6-story on this application is not a far fetch, mainly for a couple of reasons. One being the actual character and form of the structure is tapering downward towards Neighborhood Hillside and tapering towards Royal Bay. So we are starting with the heaviest density at the corner of VMP and Latoria with 594, and then tapering it down towards further developments, which seems to be where other development applications are headed as well. Again, I can't speak to those applications and not being ours, but from what we've seen, that seems to be the case. When it comes to the FAR, exactly that, we're at 1.6, so we're under the 1.75 max cap at the FSR under the current OCP. When it comes to discussing the parking and situation of parking behind buildings or underground, a little bit of clarity I want to provide there. We have one level of underground parking and one level of podium parking. So it isn't two levels above ground. One level is built into the grade as underground and would be hidden. Now, based on the site itself, when we're talking onto the site, so it is a lengthwise property if you're looking at it from Latoria Road. So if you're standing on Latoria Road looking at the site, it is lengthwise. It makes it very difficult to have a property or a site where you can align the development to have parking completely underground or behind, mainly as well based on the grade and the elevations going towards the top of the site. If you understand VMP as well and how VMP grades up, we're looking at the same hillside sloping basically on these North Latoria properties. We've done the best that we can to situate the parking underground and use the characteristics of the site itself to design the parking. The parkade structure, which I'll show in further drawings as well and then further renders, is has been mapped and designed to our best ability to hide how that parking is perceived from the street. So the frontage improvements that will happen on Latoria Road, as well as the sloping and grading of the site, really sort of speak to how the parking is going to be hidden to the best of the capacity, and whether there are some additional elements, siding elements, maybe onto the podium that could hide that as well. You'll see some of the privacy screening that's been put in place to attempt to add to sort of hiding the parking from the frontage point of view. Going to the slides now. So minor variances have been requested. Those minor variances are going to be height primarily, and the situation of parking would be based on sort of specific to the site's capabilities. There are accommodations for setbacks and creeks incorporated into the design to benefit the neighborhood hillside designation, which Desiree talked about. One is going to be the daycare that we're talking in the public realm side, and frontage where the sidewalks, bike lane are going to support improvement of the public realm. We're also looking at improvements or proposed improvements to the riparian area, which would be Latoria Creek. Aside from the 30-meter setback, which has been presented, this was also proposed in line with the realignment of Latoria Creek, improvement and enhancement of Latoria Creek with the widening of the creek, and the previously proposed and now uncertain realignment and expansion of Latoria Road to 4-lane or 5-lane from current 2-lane. So we've allowed for those in the design and the proposed development. We are hoping that we would be able to move that forward in this case by undertaking those at the time the city is ready as well. A little brief on the project. 122 units was the original presentation. We've now scaled that to 121 units and 1,100 square feet of daycare space. So we've eliminated one unit and moved to allow for daycare to provide that commercial public amenity. That amenity would be accessible by the general public, as well as being accessible by residents of the building, which improves quality of life, improves the walkability and access to amenities in the Latoria Center and or Latoria neighborhood hillside. The reason that we have not looked and considered additional commercial elements is because this would be one to support the commercial activity at the corner of VMP and Latoria with Latoria Walk, and additionally to supplement what's available in Royal Bay. While Latoria Road is walkable and there will be sidewalk enhancements provided, the setbacks and the access to this site make it difficult for general passerbys and general, bikers, walkers, what have you, to be going into the site itself and going into the subject property versus taking advantage of daycare space, drop off, and using the other amenities around them that are better suited with full visibility and full access, where this would have a bit more difficulty. Extended lawn and creek frontage to supply further green space to the project is a key highlight. Again, one for public realm and one for environmental improvement and enhancement of the environment. The neighborhood site, or the neighboring site, sorry, at 576 Latoria is not currently being developed, which right at this point in time provides a buffer zone of additional greenery. So there is a buffer space where there doesn't seem to be any potential for another building to be designed at 576, which means that some of the density would be buffered as you go further down Latoria Road. So the reason for this being phase 2 of our Latoria Q project, as we call it in the Latoria corridor, is, and part of why we want to present this sort of ahead of the completion of the visioning exercise, is to highlight some of the shared access and amenity access features with 594 Latoria. We are currently underway. We've cleared the site. We are working on finishing our grading and getting to our building permit within the year, and by the end of summer at the best case. Being able to share both access and talk to access and amenity access with 594 and move this ahead concurrently with that application highlights a couple things. One is for shared parking. One is to provide insight and commentary and get commentary back for access to facilities at 594, and to align for the tapering density that 594 and 586, 588 would concurrently have. So you would start with the 8-story, taper down to the 6, and then look to further further proposals at 568 Latoria and beyond. Again, we've covered this with the neighborhood hillside. It does allow for up to 6 stories in some cases. We would be looking here at 1.2 FSR, which would have a variance to 1.6, which we are requesting. There is substantial repair and enhancement with the creek work that's been proposed. In terms of site coverage as well, we're looking at a maximum site coverage or open space of 42.6%, with a building footprint site coverage of about 26% of the total area. The 30-meter dedication has been built into all these drawings for the creek enhancement. We've gone through this here. I've sort of talked through the points in neighborhood center with the designation where we would request a variance for 6 stories versus the 4 stories that it allows for. Our gross calculations currently for transfers at 1.57 or 1.6 to 1.75. Public amenities being provided. There's and one of the alignments for neighborhood center is it's not driving walking traffic away from the Latoria Walk core, so it is really focusing on driving the bulk of walking and pedestrian traffic to the core and providing walk-through access along Latoria and through 594 with the enhancements that have been done to Latoria Creek on that corner already. Again, we've talked through the topography and elevation, with the parking being done best to hide behind the building and into the site profile. A little bit on the conceptual here, and then there will be a slide showing renders, which I'll talk to a bit more. But conceptually, a couple of things I wanted to talk to on this, which align it with moving ahead faster than the visioning exercise, and that would be one, moving the access that has been allowed and approved for 594 Latoria onto Latoria Road, and being able to position that to be a little bit further down to the end of 586 and 588 Latoria. We feel like, given the timing on our application for the building permit, we'd like to have commentary back to discuss being able to move the approved access further down. I think engineering may be able to speak to what that does to support traffic flow onto Latoria, and pushing that out and pushing that access further back, as well as mentioned, sharing some of the resources between the two sites and being able to benefit maybe some of the public amenity space by sharing those resources, having access points, having facilities designed and shared in tandem as one site's being built and the other can continue to be developed with a similar comprehensive vision. Talking specifically to the alternate access onto Latoria Road, 594 Latoria, if you look to the bottom right here, where you see the 594 Latoria Road access onto Latoria Road. So currently there is an existing access which would be maintained, and the initial proposal was to fork into 586 and 588. We're now looking to request moving that entire access as far back as possible to the top of the entry of 586 and 588 Latoria. One, this benefits internal traffic flow. It allows, if you look at the way this road is positioned here, it allows flow between the two parkades to be done. So it allows traffic in and out of the two buildings basically to flow into the north road a lot easier and a lot better, which would allow for exit onto VMP. And for the entry access, which would be most likely right turn entry from Latoria Road, this would push it back away from the corner. So it wouldn't bottleneck potential traffic and it wouldn't bottleneck tenants turning into the property itself. So it supports, in my opinion, again, I'll ask for commentary if necessary from our civil engineers, but it would improve substantially how traffic happens and enters into the subject properties. The creek realignment is a key item here, and I want to highlight that. It does a few things. One, improves and enhances Latoria Creek substantially. At this point in time, Latoria Creek really, I think we can all agree, is more of a ditch than it is a creek. Unfortunately, it's a hotbed of garbage and waste that's kind of been strewn from wherever it's been brought in from. This realignment was done in line with the visioning that was happening with the enhancement of the corner at VMP and how that realignment was positioned to happen. So a little bit of context, we provided a statutory right-of-way on 594 Latoria to allow for realignment of the creek. Now, a lot of that realignment was that SRW was provided for realignment to happen in tandem with 4-laning or 5-laning Latoria Road, widening of Latoria Road. We understand that may or may not happen in the future. However, we've still provided the process and way of which to do that on 594, which allows for a substantial enhancement of the creek. One, by pushing it back, by allowing for widening, by allowing for new planting, and to really make it be able to bear life and bear life that can access Latoria Creek, hopefully in the future. This is an exercise that would happen with all the landowners going all the way through into Latoria Creek. I can speak to ourselves being 594, 586, 588 Latoria, and 568 Latoria. We're committed to the realignment and the enhancement of the creek. The other landowners, I can't speak to them, but from conversations with them are also open to that and working in tandem to enhance the frontage on Latoria and have built that into their plans as well for the creek realignment and enhancement of the creek, which is a substantial repairing and improvement. And it also provides a lot of landscaping and planting to provide green buffer and privacy of the subject properties and hide them from street view. Speaking to this here, the current state of the creek does not reflect supportive habitat area. Realignment would allow for future habitable area. It could bear fish and be an actual meandering stream, which it does not right now. Beautiful natural buffer to the project with proposed planting, and it's a huge benefit to the neighborhood and ecology. A little bit on the landscaping plans, you can see that in a bit more detail. 586, 588 Latoria as is does not have substantial treeing. There is tree inventory been provided. This treeing and landscaping that's being proposed would actually provide much better enhancement than actually is on the site currently. You would see substantial improvement to where you can see the sidewalk and you can see the creek realignment happening, and then behind that the green buffering that would be before you actually reach the subject, the new proposed development itself. And you see the proposed road in line with that, where it would be pushed back as far as possible to the top of the creek. So the actual access would be at the narrower point and would be a lot easier to fulfill from an engineering perspective, at least from an improvement perspective. moving the proposed access on Latoria Road from 594 to the top of 586 and 588. In my opinion, actually makes for a better repositioning of the creek. Renders here to show what the property itself looks like. So from the top left, that would be looking west. So that's on the right side of the property. If we're talking, if you're standing on Latoria Road, this would be basically the right side of the property is the top left photo. That would be the lobby, the surface parking. On the bottom left, my understanding, I'm just looking at that here. The bottom left would be the south end of the property. So you can see how the privacy screening there also seeks to hide the parking as much as possible. Again, it is podium parking and one level of underground, where we're trying to minimize and work, minimize the amount of blasting and grading that needs to happen and work with the site profile to the best of our ability. This is the best way that we've been able to outline that so far. So you can see where, and on that picture where you're looking at the south side of the property, behind, in front of those privacy screen, you will see trees that are hiding that parking from Latoria Road. And because the footprint of the site is long and and not too wide, the frontage that'll be there, the green frontage, will do a good job of sort of hiding the first level. So you'll sort of see the second level up, and you won't see that parking from the roadside itself. On the right side here, you're seeing it from the top of the property. So from the north road or the north end of the property looking down to Latoria Road, that's where the lobby and where you'll see the property tapering. Staff recommendations have been provided. Of course, we would urge staff to consider, or staff and committee to consider moving this ahead faster than the visioning exercise for the reasons being outlined, as 594 Latoria is moving into actual construction at this point in time. We'd like to have the ability to enhance the application and make improvements to what's been allowed for 594 to improve the Latoria Road access by pushing it back as far as possible and being able to look at sharing some of those accesses internally and shared amenity space. And that would require us to work very closely on those two projects at the same time. Our BP application for 594 is targeting submission in September 2024. The variances, again, there are only two fairly small, in my opinion, variances that are being requested. One is on height to 6-story from 4. And if we're looking at neighborhood hillside designation, we'd be looking at the FSR, which would be 1.6 versus 1.2. And again, the alignment here has been very specific to what 594's approval and visioning was, and it carries on that facet quite nicely. Happy to take any questions, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Just see if there's questions from the committee. Mr. Perry.
One question I had is mostly around where we are in this timeline of the re-envisionment. When a recommendation comes forward surrounding, we are looking at what we're going to do in the future for an area, I definitely am interested in knowing where we're at and how much further is left to go in order to unblock this proposal.
Thank you for the question. So the rezoning or the visioning process is in phase 2 of a 4-phase process. So under phase 1, we introduced the project at a high level to the community and council. Under phase 2, we're developing vision options, and we've conducted stakeholder workshops with landowners, community organizations, as well as council. And the next step will be to amend the vision options based off of the feedback that we had received from those 3 groups. So it's being, I'm not able to anticipate exactly when it's going to come forward, as there was additional information and amendments that will be needed that we'll need to make before we're able to bring it forward to council for endorsement. So I think the staff report does speak to a timeline of introducing it to council for endorsement in summer of 2024, but that's going to be likely postponed, I think, until a little bit further, once we've been able to accommodate the requests from council. So it's unknown at this time. It could be an additional 6 months. It could be an additional, potentially longer. It really just depends on the type of feedback that we receive from stakeholders and the public once we do go for public consultation on that.
Are there any restrictions to how long this process can take? I understand that there's the optimistic timeline, there's a realistic timeline, but what sort of possibilities are there for it to get dragged out into not necessarily indefinitely, but just trying to understand if there's any measures to hard stop this endeavor if it's not bearing fruit.
Thank you. I'll maybe defer this question to our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Desiree. At this time, we haven't got a hard stop date. In our last workshop with council, I've been asked to go back and come with more detailed conceptual plans with further details. That next engagement with council will happen in the fall. After that, depending on what's determined, we'll then do some public engagement. And then depending on that, we may or may not make decisions on what that visioning looks like. So I would anticipate at this time at a minimum would be early to late fall with the potential to come into early 2025.
Okay. And the things that I'm most trying to understand, and based on some of your answers already, I've kind of pieced some of it together, but I want to just confirm, like, is there anything in particular that is clearly part of the vision that is being set out that this proposal isn't necessarily conforming to, that they could maybe address in advance, knowing that they're supporting that vision?
I think the development itself has merit. I think the timing is really the issue. We have had preliminary discussions with the province. We have other applications on this corridor. Within that corridor, the conversations with the province is that they don't really want to see individual applications for that creek realignment. They want to see one application from basically Wishart to EMP. So I think there'll be some issues with regards to the province and their commentary on what we do with that creek realignment if that's chosen to be done. Obviously, part of the visioning, if council were to choose not to densify and leave it as it was, then the creek wouldn't have to be realigned. So in this particular instance, the creek may be realigned with no potential for further realignment, depending on what the outcome of the visioning comes. So that'd probably be the biggest concern I'd have from a process moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And then the final part with respect to this envisionment, there was the 4 phases mentioned. We're currently in phase 2. Once phase 3 is, established and more things are known, I guess maybe I'm trying to find a way to pipeline it and work within the timelines a little bit better, where if they know something is well endorsed and just needs to go through the process versus the recommendation, clearly focusing on this envisionment has to be complete and ratified before you can continue, and just finding a way to integrate that so that they can get things rolling and have it be more seamless in reality.
Yeah, we've got I think it's 7 of the properties are actively being developed, designed right now. So all of those developers are concurrently working on plans, designs, and programs. I would say this current developer is probably the furthest along in that process. So I would envision that once a vision is determined, things would move very quickly because those developers are ready to move quickly. And in fact, like I say, in this instance, faster than the city's prepared to respond.
Okay, thank you. That's everything in terms of questions to the city, to the proposal. I know that you've made mention of the daycare, but some of the renderings kind of indicate that almost that entire first floor has some level of dedication to commercial. Can you speak to any additional commercial other than the daycare that'll be present?
Yes, so the daycare is going to be the largest proposed commercial space in the facility at over 1,000 square foot. There are additional components we could provide. We could look at carving out some of the existing amenity space that we have in the building to use for a cafe or coffee shop. However, like I mentioned, diverting traffic away from VMP and Latoria Road on the corner, and then sort of focusing them on walking up into Latoria doesn't necessarily provide a very I would say it's not a very strong case for additional commercial like retail, where it would be, in my opinion, it wouldn't necessarily be the most profitable or successful venture to have them in these independent buildings, whereby if they're on the corner and we push them towards Latoria Walk, it supports the entire area's economy.
Thank you. So with respect to my overarching sentiment on this, I want to appreciate the amount of forethought that the city of Colwood puts into the planning. It's one of the key reasons why Colwood is such a successful city, in my personal opinion. The flip side of that argument is it's disheartening, I'll say, to have to put the brakes on something that's clearly in motion and something that is well thought out and conforms in a lot of good ways. The variances that are being proposed aren't extreme, in my opinion. A little bit more than minor, in my opinion, as well, as it was originally put. So it's a tough one to consider because of the hard work that the city is putting in. So really appreciate everyone's input on that one. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I believe I have Kathleen first here. Go ahead.
This is a question for Parsley Developments. Wanted to understand the progression thus far with 594. Do I have the address right? The one on the corner that you're currently working on? I heard you say something was going to be done potentially by the end of the summer, but can you just explain to me maybe with a little more detail where you're at and what the construction process is going to be, and when do you think it's going to be finished? And then secondly, when do the amenities get built?
Absolutely. So I can talk to that. As of right now, over the fall of last year, we had begun the bulk of our environmental work that we had to perform to enhance the frog pond on the corner of that property. So there's a frog pond there that we, as part of our development and part of the DP, we were required to enhance and rebuild, which we have done the bulk of. We are completing that work shortly. So we buttoned up for the winter. Obviously, with the rains, we had to be careful. Right now, where that application sits, we are working and have engaged our consultants for our BPU level working drawings. We are going to be concurrently going and completing as much of the site work as we can to prepare for the building permit, with our anticipated submission for building permit being by July or August at the latest, just based on where we are. Of course, some factors permitting, meaning based on timelines for consultants and architects, engineers, and then where everybody's capacity is. We can only move as quickly as we can, but our expected timeline for application for a BP would be then, which would mean in best case scenario, we would look to start construction, start with foundation and parkade by the late winter, again, weather dependent, but I would expect at that point, we'd probably have to wait until early spring to make sure we're not in cold snap or rains or anything like that. That's where the status currently sits.
Is it fair to say then that if you were to commence construction on the amenities that you referred to, that's not going to happen until next year in the spring, perhaps? Like you're going to do the foundation first, then the amenity floor, and up?
That is fair to say. So it is fair to say that the amenities would be built subsequent to next spring, just based on that timeline. Obviously, the foundation and parkade works typically take a while.
Yes.
So it would take a minimum of 6 months, I would say, before that's completed. However, one of the reasons, as I mentioned, for hoping to move forward this application is because during that construction drawing and working drawing process, and during the building permit process, we need to be able to map out how those amenities would align with the with the next phase and the concurrent development. And that includes the civil work that would have to be, and engineering that would have to be done for the Latoria Road access. It makes it quite a bit more difficult if we put that access in now and then have to move it and redo potential creek works, putting a culvert into Latoria Creek. And then I think our QEP can speak to this better. Doing it once is doable. Doing it twice, I don't know how doable that may be. So it's a bit time sensitive to be able to address that issue from an environmental perspective as well, of where that access onto Latoria Road is going to sit, and you know, when we can firm up that access for the benefit of traffic, for the benefit of the site, and to not disturb the environmental aspects of the site twice.
Okay, thank you.
My question is to the developer again as well, and I think it's probably maybe a bit early to ask this question, as I do believe it probably ties very much into the future visioning exercise that is coming up too, and it's really more about site access. As you've mentioned, the Latoria one a couple of times, crossing the creek is really important. I know you've got a number of very long, skinny plots that are also adjacent that kind of stretch up down Latoria as well, and sort of trying to come up with a strategy on making sure all of those accesses work in unison to your development. Because if we're looking at this development, you're 112, 130, I don't know what the other ones, so we're looking at potentially 700 units potentially, a lot of cars. Like I'm looking at all of them and I don't know what's happening, so I'm projecting a little bit in the vision. So that's what my question or my concern is just how all of those plots are eventually going to tie in, which leads me to the second question: is the North Road along the top, which is also tying on to veterans, is it correct? Does that extend, is that intended to unlock all of the other all plots, or is it just kind of end on your plot? Does that make sense? Okay.
It does, and I can speak to that a bit. So when it comes to I guess first talking to the first question on Latoria access, obviously discussing pushing back our Latoria Road access is one, to minimize the amount of accesses onto Latoria Road, which
I agree with.
exactly, and I believe the city's on side with that as well. As little traffic can be onto Latoria as possible is better because of the fact that it's a 2-lane road. So pushing that back away from the corner, away from where the slip lane is, greatly improves traffic flow. Speaking to the other properties, I can only tell from what I've seen of their initial drawings. I believe they're also trying to minimize as much access to Latoria Road as possible. The property so after 568 Latoria is one parcel, and then another parcel beyond that, they tie into Bezanton, I believe is where they would look to tie in future. And that's where that traffic control may be, to minimize traffic flows or mitigate some traffic flow risks that are there. When we're talking about the North Road on our site, the initial visioning, which was done many years ago, was and we had designed into, was the potential for that North Road to flow through the top of 586 Latoria, 594 Latoria, 576 Latoria, 568 Latoria, and then either across the creek or taper into a different design, however that may be, or exit onto Latoria Road at the end there. Obviously, we don't have ownership of 576 Latoria, so at this point in time, I can't comment to being able to extend the North Road as far that way as possible. If the landowner there was willing to cooperate, we would look to extend Latoria Road to all the way through to 568 Latoria, which we have a design in place for that, which does factor that into consideration, where if that was possible, we would also look to minimize the Latoria Road accesses from 586, 588. Again, at the moment, that's not a possibility, and we have to move ahead without that possibility.
Yeah, like I see from a connection point of view, it makes sense. Like I get it. I'm just kind of also concerned now you're different parcels and different property owners using a sort of a fairly strong connection to veterans along the north. Anyways, so my point, I think that a lot of this should probably come out in the vision exercise is kind of where I'm kind of leaning towards. Yeah, that's really, like, in terms of the site planning, the way the building's positioned and the levels, I think everything makes sense. I like it. I just was kind of really, and I hate it as a landscape architect. I hate that I'm talking about traffic, but that's it usually ends up where we always end up doing. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think, you know, I waited to speak a little bit because I've had the benefit of being part of the visioning, piece. And, you know, these are very much some of the same questions that have come up. You know, I've looked at it and looked at, you know, how do you get people to use a controlled intersection at Bezanton, for example, that goes in and is a T junction. You know, that's one of the many things that the city's explored with some of the property owners. There's that North Road. So these are all very relevant topics, and I think, you know, traffic is relevant when you talk about the type of density that you know, that will appear here. But I think just for the benefit of those paying attention, it's frustrating in some ways from a planning standpoint because you've got 12 parcels of land there, that, you know, have to be viewed independently. But from a high level, you know, at 30,000 feet, you want to look at it and look at it as a master planned area, much like, you know, Royal Bay or the Beachlands or something. And in a perfect world, if that was all consolidated, there's so many wonderful ways you could kind of address the issues. Um, and when we look at Colwood and how it's evolved over the years, many of our problems stem from the fact that we've done things bit by bit, piece by piece, and without that bigger vision. But, you know, I know the applicants, you know, they've had their own stakeholder meetings with other property owners there. You know, they're on board, they're working with the city to try to find innovative solutions on how we address that. I think for me, the one key piece we keep coming back to as a council in these visioning workshops has been the creek and what we can do with Latoria Creek. I mean, if you look at it now and you walk along there, as I do all the time on my way up to Red Barn, the Latoria Creek is just a ditch along that road now, right? And the detritus that ends up in there and, you know, the quality of the water as a result, the opportunity for us to relocate that creek back into, you know, property away from the road is significant. And we see the start of that with 594 and then your adjacent property. So the ability to be able to do that all the way down, I think, is going to be very significant. And with the density, we're able to preserve the green space and create the environment to do that. So the staff recommendation, I think, is worth pointing out, doesn't slow anything down. It allows the applicants to continue their work, but it leaves open the door to make some of these changes, if I'm correct. I'm looking at Desiree and John, but I think that's I guess the reasoning behind the wording of the motion is that they can keep moving, but at some point it will have to come before council, and we'll be able to make a decision as to whether or not you know, the visioning is aligned or the project is aligned with the vision. So I would ask maybe one more time if there's any other questions from anybody on the committee. But otherwise, I would make the motion just to ask the staff or to approve the staff recommendation. Mr. Perry, you want to speak to
I guess
You
I
are?
maybe had a slight misconception of what this envisionment is, especially with like the rezoning of, or sorry, I'll kind of back it up. How much of the rezoning application here is setting in stone the details that the envisionment of the creek and the use of Latoria truly impact? I guess I'm trying to make sure I have a firmer understanding of what about this envisionment requires the blocking of progress with rezoning.
perhaps maybe Desiree, you want to speak to that, or John?
Yes, certainly, and thank you for the question. So the visioning process will contemplate the internal road connection as well as the potential road widening of Latoria. I think would be part of that conversation separate from, it wouldn't be part of the visioning process, but it would be happening concurrently through updates to the transportation master plan. So we'd have a better understanding if Colwood Council supports increasing from Latoria Road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes and whether or not we actually need to move the creek. It would also give us greater certainty about what kinds of amenities we'd be looking for applications to provide. So this could be things like park amenities in addition to lining the creek, as well as maybe a trail connection or a linear park running. So identify where that would potentially go. And we don't know if this proposal is going to fit into that vision and if the internal roads are going to make sense with the proposal that's shown. So that's sort of the uncertainty that we have with moving this application forward ahead of the visioning process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This isn't really a question. I do want to thank you, Councillor Ward, for that information. That it's incredibly helpful in terms of understanding this. I think from my perspective, what resonates most with me is the fact that a decision has to be made with respect to the creek. And so I truly understand that this has to be a comprehensive development, and it has to be cohesive, and piecemeal is the worst thing for everybody. So I would support the city's recommendation just with a mere tweak, meaning, and not to suggest that this isn't happening, but in fairness to the developer, I'd ask that there be some hasty communication to the developer so they have a little bit of a heads up so that they can move forward at understanding what may or may not be happening. So just facilitating the communication, I think, would be an important thing to the extent that the city can do that.
Thank you. I think it's a great point, and I would attest that that in fact is happening. You know, that's the unfortunate thing, and I think there's a lesson here in that the Land Use and Planning Committee being actively engaged in this and being asked to make a decision on this evening perhaps would have benefited from an overview of the visioning process to date. So I'll take that away as a note that I think we can do a better job of communicating. Because there has been extensive communication. As I said, the developer, the folks that own the property now have met a number of times. They had a stakeholder engagement session just a matter of weeks ago. We've had a number of visioning sessions with council. There was also a public visioning session that was held here at City Hall. I know that the developers, at least 7 of them are anxious to move forward. There's a property owner that's a holdout and so on. So you end up with this sort of piecemeal bit, but there is a real push on to make it work so that we can relocate this creek in a comprehensive way and have it run all the way down Latoria. So Mr. Perry, I would say it isn't about delaying the project in any way. I'm free to admit I'm a proponent of density along that particular area because it allows us to preserve green space and do something with the creek that's long overdue. It really is, in fact, I think the opposite. It's about making sure that we allow it to move forward concurrently with developing that master plan. Because the other thing that could happen is you could recommend, well, move this forward in isolation, and then it gets to the council chambers, and in the absence of a larger scale plan, it dies out there and it forces the applicants back to the table again. And there's a lot of work and cost and time that goes into what they do. And I don't, they are stakeholders as well, as our residents, but developers are stakeholders and partners with our communities. So we don't want to waste their time either. So this motion that the staff have put forward, I think captures the best of both worlds, allows us to think big and try to really vision this in conjunction with the community and make sure that it's a community-led plan. But it allows them to continue to do their work as well. So that if the outcome is that, yes, this is what we want to do on a larger scale, we haven't slipped backwards, losing ground, months of work here. So I thought it's important to note that all those things are happening. I would say city staff have been very, very, not aggressive. That's a bit mean to say. I mean, John's a nicer guy than that, but they've been pushing this forward. So in terms of communication and things, there is a lot of activity happening there. And I am very confident that that will continue to be the case. So I did make the motion. It's on the floor to move for the staff recommendation. Mr. Perry, you're welcome to amend if you are not in favor, but I will call the question otherwise. All those opposed? Mr. Perry is opposed, but that will carry the motion. We will move forward with the staff recommendation. Thank you, everybody. It's a long evening, a lot on the table. So thank you for those who've stayed and shared their their thoughts and being here this evening. Thank you. May I get a motion to close the meeting? Thank you. We are adjourned.